Welcome into the Bearcast on Sikkim365.com. I am here with Colt Barber, and today we're talking about the Auburn Tigers, a top 25 Auburn team. I mean, that's what most people have them here in the preseason. We're going to dive into what multiple people have put for the Auburn Tigers this preseason, especially after the post-spring haul. And I mean, transfer portal, recruiting, all of those things are definitely going to be mentioned. But in general, this is a big one because this is who Baylor starts the season off with, is Auburn at the end of August. I mean, first game of the year. It's going to be really exciting on a Friday night. But it's going to be a huge test for both these teams going forward. And clearly, lots of expectations nationally for Auburn, especially compared to Baylor, which most people don't have Baylor ranked at this time.
Yeah, I mean, the way that both of those seasons went for both of those teams, it's really I think it really goes back to the fact that Auburn's in the SEC. They did well in the transfer portal. Because if you just look at these two teams on paper, there's no reason one of these teams should be ranked and the other one should not be ranked in preseason. So I think you build on the fact that SEC is a powerhouse conference. They're historically looking at Auburn saying, hey, this is what they're capable of doing. And then obviously transfer portal, Hugh Freeze in his third year, which interestingly enough, his last three seasons, going back to his time at Liberty, was 8 wins, 6 wins, and now 5 wins this past year. And you know, I'm not saying that they're trending down by any means. I think you look at what they're adding to their roster and what they're capable of doing, the potential there. But at the same time, he's not necessarily been on upwards trajectory dating back to his time at Liberty and really all the way back to his time at Ole Miss. So I'm interested to see what you have to say, or hear what you have to say, because I think this Auburn team has a lot of potential. They have plenty of talent to win. But how high is their ceiling? I don't know if we really know right now, other than the fact that people want to say they're a top 25 type of team.
I think this is all about upside. Like, I really do. This is what this projection is all about. You know, who has the most upside in the nation? And I guess people are just deciding that upside means you're a top 25 team now. Because I would also say that the floor of this team is to be right back where they were a year ago. I mean, that plain and simply could happen. Like you mentioned, this is Hugh Freeze, third year. He's 6-7 and then 5-7 last year. And I think just in general, you're kind of looking at this team and going, wow, look at what they did in the transfer portal. Look at these recruiting classes, 2 top 8 recruiting classes out of high school. Really, really impressive. They're investing in it. They're using NIL to bolster this roster. But again, it is all about upside because the floor of this team is also very, very low. I think there are some positions that are pretty solidified, but I also think in general, Auburn hasn't had good quarterback play for a long time. Auburn hasn't had good offensive line play for a long time. And Auburn's been pretty middle of the road defensively for a while as well. So can all of those change flip this year? I think that's what a lot of people are kind of betting on. And Colt, really quick, before we dive into kind of some of these rankings, I do want to mention just a few things about Auburn last year. 119th in turnover margin. That's easy to point to and say, well, what if that flips? I mean, you just flip that, you probably win a couple more games. Explosive pass plays, they were terrible in that regard. They gave up a ton of them and didn't hit on a lot of them either. They were terrible on 3rd and 4th down. And I think those are kind of the main things that made up why they were not good last year, why they were not effective. So if they can turn that around, we'll see. I think there are some reasons for optimism. They run the ball well. They play good defense, especially against the run. But in general, pretty middle of the road team. And then they did some things that bad teams do that caused them to not be a bowl team.
Yeah. I mean, they were at 1-3 in 1-score games last year. And those 1-3 records weren't necessarily against the upper echelon of the league. They did have a 1-score win, but their 3 losses came to a Missouri team that was a 10-win team, but it wasn't a great 10-win team. And then Texas A&M team that was, or maybe not Texas A&M. I remember. Anyways, the teams were middle of the road, 6-7 Oklahoma, and then a 6-7 another team. And I guess their win came over Texas A&M in overtime. So they're 1-3 in those games, and they were still 5-7. So even if you flip those games, I mean, that's a 7-win team. It's not like you're looking at a team that played 6 or 7 1-score games and was just terrible in those. And you go back to the turnover margin, and I didn't look at the specific games, but I imagine those were pretty telling in those particular games. So they reloaded on their roster, and not from the standpoint of They lost everybody, but they've upgraded significantly. And that's what teams are able to do right now with the transfer portal, especially this type of off season. When you say there's no spending limit before the house settlement goes into place, they're able to do whatever they wanted to do. I don't know all the ins and outs of what they did in terms of spending NIL money versus revenue share. But they did. I mean, you mentioned the offensive line. They've struggled in those areas. They signed guys that are ready to go on the offensive line. They spent money there. Obviously, getting Jackson Arnold at quarterback, that's kind of their linchpin right now. It looks like he's going to be the starter after spring, and that makes sense based on who else they brought in, what they had last year. That's not going to be the starter this year. So I think there's that potential. You mix Hugh Freeze with a good quarterback, potentially a good former 5-star quarterback, and you say that's a potential reason that they're going to be good this year. But at the same time, I mean, depending on how you feel about Jackson Arnold, 2 years in, we haven't seen a ton from him as far as being great. So maybe Hugh Freeze is able to get that out of him.
It's definitely possible. And I mean, Oklahoma was really bad last year, especially on the offensive side. I mean, their receivers were all hurt. They didn't block very well, which is very rare for Oklahoma. But in general, it's just a bad situation. And so Auburn brings in Jackson Arnold, but they didn't stop there. And this is why I kind of appreciate what Hugh Freeze did this offseason. They went out, got him a lot of weapons, and they got him a lot of protection. And when you look at some of the guys they added, Xavier Chaplin is an NFL guy. He's going to play tackle for them this year. They went out, they got Mason Murphy, who's going to compete to be the other tackle for this team to kind of shore up those positions. I think they feel pretty good about what they have at guard, and they returned the entire offensive line. So if they wanted to run it back, they could, but they're not going to because they brought in guys who are upgrades for the guys that they have. They went out and got probably the best wide receiver in the transfer portal in Eric Singleton to come in and kind of everybody. I mean, this was a guy that they allegedly spent $1 million on, $1 million player in Eric Singleton. Talk about Cam Coleman, who they were able to keep, who's kind of this electric freshman guy who's about to be a sophomore and just is probably going to put up a ton of numbers and be extremely efficient for them. I really like him. He's another NFL guy. They got Horatio Fields from Wake Forest. They returned Malcolm Simmons. I mean, they have so many options at wide receiver right now. And you add a guy like Singleton to kind of bring that veteran presence, and then offense line that can block for him. I really do think this offense is going to be far better. I think they're going to be much improved. I think the run game is probably the biggest question mark for me because they don't return a running back. They lost Jarquez Hunter. We'll see how they kind of revamp that. And then the other question is Jackson Arnold. How good is he? Is he good or is he really, really good? There's a big difference there. And so him just being good and solid could hold this offense back. But if he is a really, really good quarterback in the SEC, then you talk about changing the ceiling for this team. And if you project that, I can see why you would have them ranked as a top 25 team.
Yeah. I mean, you throw in his dual threat ability, he could run. We know that. And he's always been athletic, dating back to his time in high school in Texas, actually. But interestingly, with the offense, they struggled to a great extent last year. So how soon are they going to be ready in 2025? And that's what Baylor has to look at this juncture, because the first game of the season is against Auburn. So you really don't know how good this offense is going to be in game one. We saw that last year with Baylor and all the transfer guys that they brought in early in the season. Obviously, DeQuan Finn was the starting quarterback in game one. And I'm not saying that anything's going to happen with Jackson Arnold, but so many things can change from game one to game three. But game one against Baylor for this Auburn team, which is obviously at the heart of our discussion right now, who knows? I mean, truthfully, like you say, plug and play, but that's not as easy as said as done. And I'm anxious to see this team. And obviously, we're going to hear about it through fall camp, what they're capable of doing, everything that everyone's seeing, what Hugh Freeze is able to do. But so many moving parts, you really don't know what you get. It's not like Baylor this year, even though Baylor has new pieces. There's so many guys coming back to this particular unit. You kind of know what to expect. Auburn, on the other hand, has guys returning, but they're also plugging and playing a lot of new guys as well. So game one, August 29th on a Friday night in McLean. Who knows what we get from this Auburn team, especially against a Baylor defense that's looking to improve and that should be better in this particular season under Dave Aranda.
Absolutely. So I think that brings up the question, why do all these national analysts have Auburn ranked this highly? Because you are kind of going into a season with still unknowns. I know Hugh Freeze is a very good offensive coach. We've seen that time and time again. I think if the talent is there, he is a good offensive coach. But I mean, Andy Staples at On3 has him number 13 in the nation. I mean, that is a borderline playoff team. I mean, that is kind of right in the playoff picture. Ari Wasserman has him at 15, Joel Klatt 22, and then JD Piquel at 24. I think you start looking at the lower half of the top 25, that 22, 24, 25 type range. I can understand it, right? You're kind of taking this upside shot on the talent that they brought in. And I think people are kind of doing that with Texas Tech as well right now. Just kind of talking about, oh, they brought in all these transfer guys. Let's just take a shot on the upside here. But you start talking about a team that went, 5-7 a year ago as a top 15 team. I just find that really hard to believe, especially with what you mentioned, so many moving parts on the offensive side, even though they look good. How's that all going to play out? And then that's before even mentioning the fact that they still have holes on their defense. I mean, this isn't like a awesome defense. They have really good pieces and they have some good players, but if you look a little deeper, the linebacker core has a ton of questions. The defensive line depth-wise, a ton of questions. Edge rusher is a who knows type situation for them as far as getting after the quarterback. Once you get past, Keldrick Falk, it's kind of like, who else is going to really step up and be a pass rushing threat? And then you look at the back end, they had to bring in transfers because they weren't good enough there either. So I think all of that coming together is also kind of a big question mark for me about this team is how good are they going to be off defensively, especially when you're trying to play as fast as Hugh Freeze wants to play every single year on the offensive side.
Yeah. And you go into game one against the Baylor offense and really through the first part of their schedule. Now their schedule sets up more favorably for this year. Looking at it, at Baylor versus Ball State versus South Alabama, at Oklahoma, at Texas A&M. So 3 of their first 5 on the road. But I think you look at all of those as serviceable games. You potentially could win all 5 of those games. Texas A&M, obviously Oklahoma looking for bounce back years for what they had. But you start in game one against a Baylor offense that returns as much as it does in Waco, and you're talking about these holes potentially on their defense. Like, we truly don't know. You expect, as everyone is in the offseason, you expect to be better in your weakness areas, but you don't really know until it happens. And for a 5-7 team to be projected into the top 25 goes back to my opening statement in this conversation. That's not happening in any other league. That's not going to be maybe the Big Ten for on occasion, but not many teams go from a 5-7 to a top 13 team, saying you're on the edge of the playoffs contentions before the season, before you show anything, missing a bowl game to going into the playoffs. Not saying it can't happen, and maybe it does, but for someone to get that type of street cred at this point is nuts to me. And that's, I know how talented they can be. You talk about an Auburn program who's won a national championship since I can remember. You don't have to go back further than that. It's not that long ago, to be honest. And I don't know that, I don't know that should be enough. I want to see it because there's plenty of teams with plenty of talent that aren't getting that same type of love.
There are. And truthfully, I feel like a lot of these preseason polls are kind of looking too much about the schedule and not really about the team. So they're seeing Auburn's schedule and saying, oh, I think they could have a good year. But it's like, are they a top 25 quality team? It's kind of that conversation we have with the college football playoff every year as well, is like, oh, they have this record, but are they are they actually a college football playoff team? But in this situation, it's kind of just going off of, potential. Oh, I like their schedule. Oh, I think they can win a lot of games. Let's just put them in the top 25 because the schedule looks easy and because they're in the SEC. And if they go 8-4, they'll probably be a fringe top 25 team with that kind of record. And that's kind of my expectation for them. At this moment, I think this is going to be a 8-4 type team. I don't think this is going to be a 10-2 playoff team. And so there's kind of the difference there. And there's the difference I was talking about between people who have them ranked as a top 15 team at this point versus a top 25 team. There's a huge distinction there. And there's a huge difference between those kind of rankings. And that's kind of my expectation for Auburn. I understand it. I understand the hype, but I would also say probably need to pump the brakes just a little bit on Auburn's expectations for the 2025 season.
Yeah, I'm there with you. And truthfully, like, this is a team you realistically can say they could be significantly better than 5-7 that they were last year by the end of the year. They could be playing better. I mean, you throw in a Mercer game at the end of that schedule in November. I mean, say they start off 4-1 with somewhere one of those losses, and then you have 5 right there. Well, if they can just go 3-6 in the rest, or 3-2 in the rest of their games, I mean, they're significantly further along than they were last year. So I think this is a team that has plenty of potential. Obviously, from the Baylor standpoint, we're looking at it as, what about game one? I mentioned that earlier. Like, where does this matchup fall in game one? I mean, I can't say that they should be picked over Baylor at this point. And that goes to my rankings of where should they be going into game one of the season. I would not pick them over Baylor right now. And maybe my opinion changes, but based on what everything Baylor has returning, specifically on the offensive side of the ball, a guy like Dave Aranda who you expect to be better, I'm not picking that game and calling Auburn a top 25, top 15 team. Top 25, maybe you give him that, but not a top 15 team. And that means going into literally game one of the season. I just couldn't do it myself.
No, I couldn't either. And I find it hard to imagine that people who really do a deep dive on these things could truthfully have Auburn ranked ahead of Baylor based on momentum, guys returning, cohesiveness with the program, kind of where Baylor is trending up for next year, whereas Auburn is kind of just what they were last year. Auburn feels like the team that's waiting for the year that Baylor had last year. And Baylor is a team that's looking for this kind of next step, right? This double-digit win type tier. And so I think that's kind of the difference, right? And that's what I view both these teams, which means that first game will be a really tough game. I mean, it will be a really, really good game, because I do think Auburn is going to trend up by the end of this year. But I don't think after last year, this is a program that is trending up to the point where they're a top 15 team. Whereas I look at Baylor and I'm sitting there going, man, some of these rankings have Tech as like a top 10 team. And I'm just kind of sitting there going, okay, so we're just going off of what they brought in the portal, and not taking into account what Baylor kept from leaving the program. Yeah. And that's, to me, a much bigger deal than what you bring in from the portal. You have to have a mixture of both. But if I'm taking new blood versus cohesiveness in this day and age, taking cohesiveness. And I think that's what Baylor has the edge over Auburn with, and the edge over a lot of programs who are simply ranked ahead of them at this point in the offseason.
Yeah, I know we're getting a little long here, but I've made this point multiple times, and not that Sawyer Robertson was ever going to leave. I know there was all that speculation, but to retain a guy like Sawyer Robertson, where would he have been ranked in the transfer portal? Or where would Michael Trigg have been ranked in the transfer portal?
Josh Cameron.
Or where would Josh Cameron, Colton Price at center? Just go through the list on both sides of the ball. Keaton Thomas, where would they have been? So I think that you start discussing those things and you retain those guys should, in my mind, be re-ranked as a transfer portal addition, because where they were. Like, if we're going to rank transfer portals into programs, we need to rank returning players and up or alter their ranking from where they started, because if they've improved, they should earn new rankings. You start looking at it that way, these rosters look a lot different.
They sure do. You throw in Jackie Marshall as well. I mean, this is just kind of one of those ridiculous scenarios where you're not going to be able to re-rank it. So it's just people going off of what they see on your team. But at this point, no one cares about what they see on your team. They want to see the flashy new additions.
Right.
And that's where I think things have kind of gone off the rails a little bit with these post-spring rankings. I think we're seeing it a little with Auburn as well. Even though, to be clear, Colt and I both believe Auburn will be an improved team this year and be a good team and be a very tough matchup for Baylor, just not a top 15 team, which I think is a pretty fair statement to make. Colt and I will be back later this week. We'll have another Bearcast for y'all. We're actually going to be talking about the Big 12 quarterbacks. We're going to rank them because we've seen some ridiculous rankings over the last week or so. So we're going to get those right for you here on Sikkim 365. But thanks for listening today. This has been the Bearcast on Sikkim365.com.